Very good afternoon to our valuable partners and CIO friends. I trust you and your near and dear ones are safe and healthy. So, in this, the massive disruption caused by this pandemic has made us realize the significance of the local power of business as well as manufacturing capabilities. Atmanirbhar campaign has opened up the market for our partners as fiscal stimulus 2.0 emphasize on no global firm in government tender below 200 crores. Embracing the ACPL Supertron VAT spirit of Yes We Care will continue to support you all and jointly we evolve and thrive. Without much ado, I like to welcome our visionary chairman and managing director, Mr. Vishnu Kumar Bhandari, who started his journey in 1993 to establish Supertron to support Indian IT. It is also my privilege to introduce today's session our honorable guest, Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti. He is the chairman of Sailesh Haribhakti and Associates, Chartered Accountant. He is also currently the non-executive chairman of L&T Finance Holding Limited, L&T Mutual Fund, Future Lifestyle Fashions Limited, NSDL E-Governance Infrastructure Limited, and Blue Star Limited. As well as he is also board of directors in many few is Torrent Pharmaceuticals, Ambuja Cements, Bajaj Electricals, Gaja Capitals. His other activities include digital board governance, MSME verification, vigilance and shared services, data-led lending and counterparty assessment, and business transformation using exponential technologies and outsourcing. His many accreditation and recognition is distinguished fellow of IOD. He just joined from that session right now. Adjusted the best non-executive independent director in 2007, and multiple awards have been won for governance excellence by companies he is on board of. Taking into consideration his background, we'll expect him to throw light on yesterday's economic package announced by the Honorable Finance Minister. So please join me again in welcome Mr. Bhandari. Over to you, Mr. Bhandari.
Thank you, Devraj. Good afternoon, friends. Once again, I welcome to all of you at our today's session. I am very thankful to Mr. Sailesh, who has given his valuable time. As Devraj said, he's very busy and just finished one webinar, and again, after this meeting, again, he have some program. So we are very thankful to Mr. Sailesh, who has given us his very well time. I'm also thankful to all our SI partners and CIOs who are joining our this seminar. Dear friends, this is a very tough time and difficult time. So on this difficult time, we must understand what should be the future and what technology should be there for future business. For Supertron side, we always want to bridge between technology to end user through our SI partner. We are always trying to make this bridge stronger and stronger. And we believe in partnership, so we always want to upgrade to our SI partner about the technology and about the business enhancement. In this tough time and difficult time, there must be some opportunity also. And technology side, we must have bigger and bigger opportunity. So what is the bigger opportunity and what we should plan in our business and what changes we should do in our business and what is the need of and what are the opportunities there from the government side or from the corporate side or from the middle SME. So who is the right person, because digitalization is the bigger business in future. So we found that Mr. Sailesh is the best person, best speaker who can guide us in this tough time, who can tell us what we should do the focus thing and how to revolve our business in this tough time. I don't want to take much time, and I over to Mr. Devraj to Mr. Sailesh also. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me say what a delight it is to be here at this webinar. I think uh, I have the deepest respect for your community, because what you do is exactly as Mr. Bhandari mentioned. You create the bridge between technology, which is an amorphous, very subtle, uh, non sort of physical thing, and the organization whose processes and whose enablement you want to now bring a transformational change in. Let me begin, as was requested of me, to give a little bit of context of what the package that we have had is doing for us as an economy. So, if you look at the entire set of things that have already been announced, you will find that there are 5 components which have been experimented with. First and most important is providing credit. The biggest emphasis has been on credit flow. So you have a 3 lakh crore opportunity for the MSME sector to actually access money from the banking system. You also have an additional ability to access money from the non-banking finance sector because of the ability of NBFCs to actually draw money from this pool that has been allocated and on-lend it to MSMEs. The second big thing that has been done, and if you look at the entire set of TLTRO funds that have been sanctioned already, it is 150,000 crores, with about 50,000 crores identified solely for NBFCs. So we have an NBFC sector which will revive dramatically and play its role as the last mile link to actually make money come into the hands of the small and medium businesses of our country. That's a very, very important link in the credit chain. The banks will be motivated because of this 3 lakh crore guaranteed window to lend out the funds that they were hitherto shy to lend out. So there is real change that is likely to happen in terms of the bank's behavior. But all this money will go out only if there is what is called data-led appraisal and data-led monitoring, which comes into place in an absolutely definitive way. Because without that, the credit flow might lead later on to non-performing assets for which a guarantee would have to be provided by the government in this particular case, and where it is lent by the banks and NBFCs without the support of the guarantee, huge NPAs for them. And therefore, to protect against that, the big intervention going forward will be the data which will have to be pulled out from all the public systems and all the places where data is available. The other aspect of this has been the making available of food and rations. Yet another has been direct cash transfers to the accounts of rural women and rural bottom of the pyramid people who must have that kind of resource, 1,000 rupees per head, to actually begin their survival. See, there are 2 things in a pandemic. First, you want to survive, and then you want to rise up and become resilient. So to make sure that people survive, The government has provided them with food and provided them with direct cash transfers. In addition, there have been various other forbearances which have been given. Today, we will see the whole package, I hope, for agriculture, and we will also see some further cash transfers, which I believe will have to be made to the absolutely very small cottage and village industries. So with that, we will have 20 lakh crores actually getting circulated with a further velocity in our whole system. So M3 will rise without getting the quantum of cash notes in the system necessarily to go up, as we can now rely a lot on the digital infrastructure that has been laid down, the payment infrastructure that India has laid down in the last 5 years. That's going to be a very major enabler of this jump starting of the working capital cycle. Now, why is this package necessary? This package is necessary to provide support, to make sure that the energy required to restart after this hugely fearsome pandemic wears away. And the likelihood is that we will be able to flatten the curve and see far better outcomes in the next few months. And therefore, we are, in my reckoning, something like 2 months away from seeing the pandemic become part of our life. It's never going to go away. I think that's one thing that we all need to recognize. We'll all have to raise our immunity. We'll all have to change our habits and to make sure that we live a healthier life. So if there's any one word which defines the fresh actions that people are taking, it is getting better health and getting better immunity. Which source you get it from will be determined by your own beliefs. It could be Ayurveda, it could be homeopathy, it could be various other alkaline foods and water. So all of that are choices that we are making today as individuals. And hopefully, within a short period of time, we will then have a vaccination which will enable us to remain healthy without having the fear of catching an infection from somebody. So this is the big context. So what has this done to the world? It has actually put the world into two components. One is the purely digital world, which is going to work from wherever work is necessary to be done. Why? Because they have disconnected completely from the physical aspect of being able to move things, change things, add value to it, make sure that it becomes useful to somebody and have it delivered. Those who are completely independent of the physical world will form one component of the world. And who are these people? There are companies like Amazon, like Microsoft, like Facebook, like Alibaba, Tencent. These are the companies which have a completely digital proposition. They work off platforms, they work off completely non-physical ways of actually performing their tasks. Uber was a great example of a digital enterprise, but it sputtered because they had this connect with the physical world. You needed to have one human being and you needed to have two destinations, a starting destination and a closing destination, to be able to make the taxi ride possible. So there are many other examples of companies which had one leg in the physical space, which are today hurting. Airbnb is another instance which is hurting. Those who are purely in the physical world have now begun to realize, and their boards have begun to realize, that they have to make a quick transition to as much digitalization as possible. And I can tell you from my experiences at the few boards that I have attended after the pandemic has struck, that the conversation about digitalization is huge. This morning, 90% of the time at a board meeting, which I was chairing, was spent entirely on looking at how do we bring technologies together? How do we create an offering which is purely digital, which can be delivered fully in a remote way, and actually start providing value to the customer without there being the need of a physical person actually interfacing with the client. That's the big challenge that we were debating and discussing. And how do we make sure that everything works off a platform of communication devices? How do you make sure that all this works in a seamless manner? So what is required to make this happen? And where does the role of the system integrator come into place? I see in the whole process of digitalization, and I can state here in the presence of about 80 professionals in this activity who are engaged day in, day out with making this whole technology play happen, that there is going to be no organization in the world, however small, which is going to remain away from a digital presence and a digital interactivity. None. And therefore, the opportunity for all of you is huge and is very, very significant. So what are the various things that you all would get involved in terms of making the choices for companies? Keeping in mind the vision that people ultimately want to become fully independent of where they operate from. This is the critical delocalization, I call it, is the critical watchword that will drive your activities. And you will have to make your services and your outcomes available at a price that at scale, your customers or your groups of customers or the clusters of customers that you choose to service can afford. So these two are critical dimensions of where you will pitch your own tent. So what are the critical things that companies need today? They need to first understand the importance of capturing data sets as they actually arise. And that becomes your first deliverable notion. How do you convince people that if you do not convert the entire physical reality of an organization to digital properties, which can then be combined, work together, mixed into the reality of things, measure the inputs, measure the outputs, make sure that the conversions happen, and make sure that the delivered output goes away into the stream, the value chain, where it will finally be consumed, which is in operating relationships between man and machine, between employee and company, between customer and your business, between supplier and your business, between government and your business. All of these relationships you will have to first map and make sure that people who are using your services get ready to make sure that all of these relationships get onto digital platforms and into digital ways of operating, moving, and changing and adding value. Then you will have to map where they are against where they ought to be and should be. And you will then create the path which will systematically take them from their non-digital, physical, mixed reality kind of operating methodology to a completely digital, automated. Now, this can happen in many ways. It's not necessary that everybody buys in the most expensive software and equipment. There are many ways to turn this. Software can be provided as a service. The entire fixed cost that people were used to incurring on hardware has moved to the cloud, on software can move to the paradigm of software as a service. What is required is for you as system integrators to make sure that this whole new context and this whole new availability becomes into the reality of your customer, however small or however large. So you will have to start thinking along the whole spectrum of your customers and see how each one of them can get into this path that you can then craft. Then you will craft the hardware. You'll make sure that you are accessing the cloud in the right manner. You'll make sure that you have on the ground the equipment which will enable the devices which are available with the organization, available with their people, and available at locations where activity is happening to interact and send data to the cloud, capture it back when necessary, process it in the way required, and then send it back for making it available whenever a decision or an action is required to be done. Bring into this mix the fact that this data will increasingly be stored in sensors. The world is about to become, in 2020, a trillion sensor world. And you will need to figure out how your clients and how the people that you can influence will be able to capture extraordinarily large number of sensors to make sense out of the digital world that you want to lead them into. IoT, edge computing, quantum computing, all of this will become part of your vocabulary and become part of the processes that you will have to set in motion to make sure that effectively and efficiently and at a minimal cost, an organization of any size will be able to capture the promise of technology. Provide also. So this is all the hardware and all the connectivity and the cloud. And so you've established all of that as the basic lay of the land. Then you'll have to choose a mix of software, which some of which you will have to make the organizations you're working with buy. Others you might be able to position in the realm of a software as a service. And this is becoming increasingly possible. Take even a very non-intuitive space like restaurants. Now you can reimagine a restaurant business in terms of kitchen as a service. So instead of it being a restaurant, imagine the enterprise to be a kitchen, which will be available to customers as a service to cook and prepare meals of the kind that the customer wants at a scale of one. So fully personalized, fully available to the customer exactly as he or she needs. But the kitchen will work in its de-integrated parts to actually make this available. The whole business model is getting reimagined and reconfigured. Or take recipe as a service, or take the experience as a service. You can provide for a restaurant client of yours, for example, the gastronomical experience of sushi from the most enlightened chef and the most competent chef in Japan, right there in whichever location your client desires to make that experience actually be received by the customer. And again, you could delocalize it by enabling the entire service to be digitally and seamlessly provided wherever the client wants to consume it. And that has all become possible because of mobility, cloud computing, quantum computing, and making sure that software and the entire business model gets de-integrated and offered in small bites, which people can put their mind around, can put their business around and put value around it and make sure that it can get consumed as they wish. So you then have the challenge to make sure that the entire set of people who will operate this digital enterprise are empowered and trained and capable of doing this. Big change in mindset that you will have to do is you will have to make sure that your chief contact in the companies that you serve should not be a purely technical person, but should be a techno-commercial person who understands the business model, who understands technology, understands hardware, software, but also understands the business and how it will operate. Because otherwise, you will not be able to effectively get the outcomes delivered to your clients. Now, when you've done all of this, you'll have to continue to hold hands with your customers to make sure that they actually start seeing the benefit of the digitalization that you have enabled. And then whenever they get to a stopping point, for example, people can come to a stopping point in many instances if they have a cyber attack, for example. So if there is a cyber attack and you need to then restart and rebuild the systems, then there is a huge amount of restructuring that you would have to enable in order that they can make their business continue to operate after a service has been denied. And so through the entire life cycle of a client, you can build relationships as a system integrator to enable the power of technology through disrupted business models get available to your clients in the way that will enable them to draw far more value from the environment that is emerging around us. It's an extraordinarily interesting and exciting world that is being created because of the amazing march of technology. And in that space, the kind of active role that you can play as system integrators has become of tremendous significance. In this effort, I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, stay digital. We're very happy to answer questions around the broad theme that I have put before you. And we could have a longish question answer session. We've got sufficient time for it. So we can move into that.
Haribakshi Sahib, can I ask one question just now?
Yeah, Mani sir.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Mani sir.
Sir, I am Vora speaking, a member of IMC. Today morning, I went to State Bank of India for my export incoming remittance came, export incoming remittance. They asked a lot of documents. Now you are talking about digital technology. The branch which is there, we are not blaming individual, branch which is there, they want FEMA declaration, they want pro forma invoices, they want purchase order of the party, they want our own letter. Now 4 or 5 documents I have to physically submit tomorrow morning. Although today I went to Waghly State and came. Now you see the branch level, then it goes to a head office TFCPC, then he creates the one acknowledgement number, then again I have to go. So sir, the ground reality of the digital technology and what you are speaking, there is a wide gap. Can you please comment on this at the bank level, top bound? I'm talking the ground level, sir. Don't talk about the higher level.
No, I think what you say is so true. And that is the big opportunity that you have as a system integrator, as a person who is involved in the process. You know, if State Bank has not been able to take automation and dematerialization of all documents to the branch level, it is something that is crying out for service from professionals like you. And this is exactly the opportunity that you will have. You were so intolerant, Mr. Vora. You felt so hurt that you had to go from Waghly Estate to wherever else you went, and you had to submit all these physical documents.
Yes.
It's crazy. I think what you described must happen from your home or from your office without there being the need to travel to a branch. I think this whole concept of a branch being a place where you have to show documents and all of
Exactly.
that is already obsolete. In Canada, there are branches of banks which, if you ask for cash, they will get stunned by you. There is no question. The whole of Europe has more or less gone cashless.
Cashless.
Whole of Far Eastern Asia has gone cashless. In South Korea, if you go into a small grocery shop, you cannot buy grocery for cash. You have to have a payment mechanism which will enable you to buy the grocery, even if you want to buy just a shaving cream or a razor that you have left behind. So what you're saying is exactly what I was elaborating in terms of the huge opportunity for professionals who are listening to this webinar. So thank you, Mr. Vora, for that very good question. We need to dematerialize those documents. We need to cancel out the process of having to physically be somewhere to get some action done.
Lot of document. Haribhakti Sahib, I am member of IMC. I have been listening you last 1 decade on several, financial sector, budget proposals and all. Thank you very much. Namaskar, Sahib.
Namaskar.
Yeah,
Namaskar.
thank you, Mr. Ajit. Thank you very much for your nice queries. Thank you, sir. So, any other question, my friends? I request you can unmute yourself and then you can raise your questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please,
Yes.
Mr. Subramania.
Sir, thank you for your valuable knowledge. I just had one question which to all of us and to the entire country and all the business people out here seems to be a very good opportunity that we've been hearing. There's been a lot of sentiments and emotions for the Chinese people and the people of China and the government of China who are responsible for this. Now, what the Indian government also senses, and people are also quite sensitive to this whole fact that considering India the next biggest place for trading and power and for business after China, now that a lot of people may shift to this country from China, or people who are operating in China, foreign companies, European companies, or American companies who are operating in China may shift their base to India, and India might be the face for Asia Pacific. We have this region called Asia Pacific. So, and geographically, we so well connected in terms of transportation, be it air or by sea. Do you see this opportunity in real coming now? Of course, it's not going to come now, it's going to take time. But do you really see that we should be prepared to address this opportunity in terms of infrastructure and in terms of other resources and everything? Do you really see this coming up, and how do you think we can really?
I got your question. Very, very interesting question. Almost everybody has been fed by media, by politicians, by all of us, that now is the time for India to pick up the slack that China will vacate. Let us not be too sure about that. I think we must not underestimate the fact that China got out of this pandemic and is today almost at full capacity, earlier than any other nation on earth. Please let us not forget what they have demonstrated on the ground as their ability to bounce back. We must respect that. China today is the leader in technology. If I look at 5G, if I look at quantum computing, if I look at VR, AR, MR, I look at all the exponential technologies the world has, China is already in the lead. The largest experimentation with augmented manufacturing we saw very visibly that they could construct a 40-story hospital building in, I don't know, what was it, 5 days, 10 days, something like that.
Yes.
And I think it is very, very foolhardy on our part. That opportunity was always there. There was nothing stopping us to compete with China. We just needed to get more efficient, more digital, more technology oriented, use the benefit of professionals such as all of you who are represented here, system integrators. We needed to get our technology act together. We needed to get our e-governance acts together. This document rubbish that Mr. Vora described has to be out of our systems.
Okay.
All the clogging up that happens because of our whole system being so hidebound, so mental, the mindsets are so ancient. We need to do so much relearning, unlearning, making sure that we accept new ideas, want to embrace them. If we don't do all of this, the world is not going to come knocking at our door. So we need to get prepared by genuinely changing our mindsets and becoming really the leaders in implementing exponential technologies as they converge. But having said that, let me give you an opportunity that we can pull in tomorrow morning if we decide. Take vertical agriculture. It's not technology which requires system integrators, but it requires just a mindset change. Each one of us in our own homes or in our own societies can become self-sufficient in terms of the leafy vegetables, the salads, the berries, and some of the fruits that we want to consume. It's just a mindset that we need to change. And all the inconsistencies in the value chain we need to remove so that we get used to the idea that we must get close between the production center and the consumption center and remove all the arbitrage and all the inconsistent. So that's really the big challenge that we have to face. If we face that challenge and we overcome it, India always had the chance to compete with China and will perhaps have a slight advantage because of what you said was the psychological climate that has been built up against China. But let me tell you, don't count on that psychological advantage to remain for long if we don't get our act together. The chance is for us to get our act together fast.
There is a time to get our act together, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Subbu. Thank you very much. Anyone else, my friend? So I got one query. I'm not going. He's sending me a personal message. Is that in the space of digital-led lending, what
Yes.
specifically in the construction and real estate industry, how they should act and plan their working models?
Excellent question. And while I will focus on the two activities that you have mentioned in the question, what I'm going to say is going to be applicable to the entire country. What is the meaning of data-led lending? Why is it better than the kind of lending we are doing today? Because all of us leave a footprint. What is our footprint? Have we met all our obligations? Obligations to pay tax, obligation to pay provident fund. When I say tax, it means both direct and indirect. Making sure that our balances with our banks have been, our credit is within limits, our balances are in order. All of those are our financial footprints and many other sources for credit card behavior. All of those actually track our financial behavior and footprint. Then let's take our legal behavior and footprint. How many people How many times have we been involved in accusations of check bouncing? Or how many customers of ours have had checks which they've given us bounce? Who is responsible? Both parties. I mean, you for not having assessed your customer properly, and your customer for having not met an obligation that they had committed to. All of us are in a virtual chain. And if any one of us misses an obligation, then that becomes known, whether it is legal, financial, behavioral. All of this is now trackable. Now let's also look at our governance. Let's say that you have a small limited company listed on a small bourse. So you have a board of directors, you have auditors, you have people who are with you. All of these changes in boards, in people, and in everything else that you're doing is today trackable, because this information is available with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, with the Registrar of Companies, and in various other databases that are prevalent to track all of this that companies are doing. So this company that I'm chairman of has taken on the task of putting all of this data together and providing a score to judge at the beginning of a lending or the beginning of a counterparty transaction happening, as to whether this counterparty can be trusted based on past tracked information. Now, there's a score which you can rely on. And if you find that you want to take the risk and still do business with them, then you'll create your own protections. And if you are a lender, then you will make sure that you have taken sufficient margin, collateral, and done all other tighter processes to make sure that your lending will not go bad. Equally, during the time and tenure that your loan is outstanding, you want to be able to monitor and measure the good conduct of your client. And that has to become part of the system. It has to feed back. Now, if we often forget that we are part of an ecosystem, and if we don't meet our obligations on time, we are disabling others to meet their obligation. So we have all these very, very ancient concepts which expect us that other people will meet their obligation to us, but we can be a little bit on the edge and we can miss it by 10 days, 5 days, 20 days. We have always had this mindset that why is the bank so touchy about not making a report reach on a particular day? It's because the evaluation cycle will go forward and the banker will not be able to reset your credit. That is why you need to be on time on everything. Now, unless this whole mindset is altered and everybody pledges today, right now, to make sure that they will meet, we expect government to pay refunds and we expect government to pay everything which is due to us on time. Are we equally taking the pledge that we will never delay payments to our creditors? That is the question. Now that has become trackable, and your behavior not only has become trackable, but let me tell you, it is being tracked. And the lending that will happen to you will depend on whether you have been a disciplined participant in the financial sector. So the onus has now moved to every one of us to be totally diligent in terms of how we will behave and how we will be a responsible commercial citizen. But this new paradigm is fantastic. It just makes credit flow far more smoother and far more at a higher level, because the cycle can come back and refresh itself. That's where I would say is the obligation for every one of us to fulfill.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Haribhakti. Thanks for the clarifications. And this is something we have been closely trying to work with the financial institutions but for the construction and real estate industry, but somehow the legacy credit approval processes in the financial institutions take anywhere from 3 weeks to possibly 3 months or longer than that. And the company or the institution which you are directing in the digital lending, if I would be keen to engage with the firm so that possibly that is an area. We did meet up with Credit Watch in Bangalore, which is also into a similar risk scoring model to advise the financial institutions. But I would like to engage with you so that possibly this is an area which will solve our key, what should I say? It's a key problem for our facilitation of credit to the real estate construction industry.
I cannot agree more with you. I'll be very happy, Mr. Dev. I will give you the connectivity.
Yeah.
And you can transfer it to the people.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dev. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks, Dr. Haribhakti.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. So I think Snehal, I am unmuting you. You have a query, Snehal?
Yes. Yeah. Hello, sir. It's good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I have a query that from where I am located. I am located in Bharuch, Gujarat. I see so much of cash flowing around. Legal system, you name legal system, labor contracts, doctors, hospitals, lot of cash is still flowing. So, I mean, technically, can we do something about it?
By itself, cash is not an evil at all. Not accounting for the cash and the transactions is a huge evil. Now, you will ask me, how do you make sure that those who are camouflaging their transactions by using cash will get caught? The time has now come where the information networks of the government have become so strong. You take the last 20 years since the time that the tax information network has been set up. And I'm chairman of the company which set up this tax information network. So I know firsthand that the rate of increase in tax collections has been consistently more than the rate of increase in GDP. Why? Because my expenditure is somebody's income. And if I have shown something as an expenditure and that person has not shown it as an income, it shows up. It's a red flag and it can be captured. Now, this information system is working its way through to try and now capture in more and more sophisticated ways this kind of cash utilization which you are talking about in Bharuch. I must warn you, and you must warn people around in your ecosystem, that it will soon know that you are underreporting your income. The day is not far away. Today we are seeing that the notices that the government is sending out to people are so sharp and so backed by data and information that it becomes extremely hard for people to deny that they have cheated. And so the whole thrust of the data systems of government are so strong that they will deliver this kind of value to all of us as citizens who want to pay our taxes honestly.
So it'll catch up then. Yeah. It'll catch up to whoever who is doing this camouflage transactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Day is not far.
Yeah, thanks, Snehal. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, can we take another 2 questions?
I think we are at the end of our time.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we have
that's
4 minutes left. So
yeah, one
but we
question.
we can take 2 questions. We can take 2 questions.
Yeah. So one of our friend Rishikesh is asking is that most of the construction laborers have left city, and similarly many security guards have also gone. repairs of various electronics and other products have also left. Do not know when they will be back from rural area. What do you suggest the way in such vacuum condition? Over to you, sir.
Fantastic question. Whoever has asked it is thinking absolutely correctly. Don't wait for these people to return. Start thinking of how you can get the service from such highly skilled people from wherever they are. Start thinking about remote infrastructure management, remote repair, telehealth, the remote conversation with you, the e-learning for people that you will now have to retrain because these guys have left and gone back to wherever they want to go. Nobody can stop that. You will either have to move to where they are or extract value from them from wherever they are. Let me give you an illustration. This is an actual example of a home that was designed in Mumbai, where the architect or the interior designer was in Houston. The person who took the measurement of the home was in Chandigarh. The furniture was made in China. It was delivered at a port in Gujarat, and it got transported to Mumbai and got installed in this place completely accurately. You have to start thinking about how do you work in a world which makes the place from where you are working kind of redundant and unimportant. I call that delocalization. So there are 7 Ds that technology will now acquire. First is disruption. Then there is digitalization. Then there is deception. So you wait for the thing to actually make happen. Then there is demonetization. So you reduce the cost, change the cost curve. Dematerialization. You don't need some things, like the camera has become integrated into your phone. You don't need to waste the material to make a camera. Then there is delocalization, which we've been talking about. And finally, democratization, which will make the output available at an affordable cost. So if you think of technology and disrupting your own way of working, think along these 7 dimensions, and you will start finding solutions, technology-driven solutions to answering your own question.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point you have mentioned, sir, and that's we all as a entire ecosystem we have to think on that line, because the world is moving. It's entire world is under renovation. I'll say. I think whatever you are saying, I say that it's a world is under renovation, and then we have to think innovatively, to work on closely, so that everybody will get benefited. So thank you very much,
Absolutely.
sir, with that. Thank you very much with that. So I request my colleague Bipul to say thanks to you, and thanks to all my partner and CIO's friend. Over to you, Bipul.
Thank you, Salesh, sir, for your valuable time. The depth of your understanding of digitization and your ability to present the subject in such an interesting and a clear way, which is very easy for us to comprehend and fathom, has definitely made this webinar a memorable one. I'm sure our partners had a very interesting evening, and this subject has intrigued us all, and all of us have been planning to do it. But I believe the COVID situation has put us in a hyperdrive on this journey of digitalization. You rightly spoke about the role of NBFC in the credit offtake to MSMEs, and how data lead monitoring and appraisal is an imperative for smooth credit flow. And you had also explained how the world is, in a broad aspect, divided into a physical and virtual world, and our steps should to embark on this journey should be to convert the physical reality to digital properties. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking the questions, and we had a wonderful time as well, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay safe, stay digital.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My
Thank you.
friends,
Bye-bye.
stay safe.
Thank you, Dev. Thank you. Thank you.